Most people believe change requires hours of effort, massive plans, or perfect conditions. But real transformation doesn't begin with time. It begins with intention, and intention can be activated in just 60 seconds. Every day, before you open your phone, before the noise of the world rushes in, take 1 minute to ask yourself a simple question. What is the one thing I can do today that moves me forward? And not 10 things. Not everything, just one. This habit works because clarity creates momentum. When you know why you're acting, the how becomes easier. That 60 seconds of focus shifts your brain from reaction to direction. You stop living by default and start living by design. Great leaders, high performers, and fulfilled people aren't driven by constant motivation. They're driven by consistency, and consistency is built from small daily decisions, not grand gestures. 1 minute of clarity today compounds into confidence tomorrow. When you repeat this habit daily, you begin to trust yourself. You start finishing what you start. You stop waiting for motivation and start creating it. And slowly, almost quietly, your identity begins to change. Because when you honor 1 minute with purpose, you honor your future with action. And that is how lives are changed, one intentional minute at a time. Change does not begin when you finally find enough time. It begins the moment you decide that what you are doing today is no longer enough for the future you want. Most people wait for a perfect schedule, a quieter season, or more energy before they take action. But time is never the missing piece. Intention is. When intention is clear, even the smallest moment becomes powerful. When intention is absent, even endless time leads nowhere. Big transformations rarely announce themselves with dramatic breakthroughs. They arrive quietly, disguised as small choices that seem almost insignificant in the moment. A single decision to pause before reacting, 1 minute spent thinking instead of scrolling, a brief moment of honesty with yourself about what truly matters. These moments don't feel heroic, but they are, because they shift you from living on autopilot to living with purpose. When you act with intention, you stop reacting to life and start directing it. You are no longer driven by urgency or pressure, but by clarity. This clarity doesn't demand perfection. It only asks for presence. It asks you to show up fully in the small moments you usually overlook. And those moments, repeated daily, begin to reshape your habits, your mindset, and eventually your identity. People often underestimate the power of focus. They believe change requires massive effort, but the truth is that focus multiplies effort. One small, intentional action done consistently is more powerful than scattered effort done occasionally. Intention gives meaning to action, and meaning gives action staying power. This is why people who know their why don't quit easily. They may slow down, but they don't stop. Small, focused moments also rebuild trust with yourself. Every time you follow through on a simple, intentional action, you send a message to your mind that you can be relied upon. Confidence is not built by big promises, it is built by small kept ones. Over time, these moments compound. What began as a simple decision becomes a pattern. What became a pattern becomes a habit, and habits, whether we notice it or not, shape the direction of our lives. The danger is not failure. The danger is drifting. When days pass without intention, life starts happening to you instead of through you. But when even 1 moment in your day is intentional, it acts as an anchor. It grounds you. It reminds you that you are not powerless, that you always have the ability to choose your next action. Real change is not loud. It doesn't rush. It builds patiently through repetition. A minute of clarity today leads to a better decision tomorrow. Better decisions lead to stronger habits. Stronger habits lead to a different future. This is how transformation truly happens, not through time, but through intention applied in small, focused moments, again and again. Most people start their day reacting instead of leading. They open their eyes and immediately step into noise, demands, and distractions. Messages, responsibilities, and expectations begin pulling them in different directions before they've even decided what matters. In that state, the day controls them. But asking one powerful question can change that dynamic completely. What is the one thing I can do today that moves me forward? This question creates focus in a world built to steal it. It does not ask you to do everything or to solve your entire life in one day. It asks for clarity, not pressure. By narrowing your attention to one meaningful action, you shift from overwhelm to direction. You stop measuring your day by how busy you were and start measuring it by whether you made progress. The strength of this question lies in its simplicity. It forces honesty. You can't hide behind excuses or distractions when you ask it sincerely. It brings your priorities into the light and exposes the difference between what feels urgent and what actually matters. Often, the one thing that moves you forward is also the thing you've been avoiding, because growth is rarely comfortable. Yet this question gently confronts you with that truth, without judgment. When you ask this daily, your decisions become intentional. You begin to design your day instead of drifting through it. Even if the action is small, it carries weight because it is aligned with your long-term direction. Progress does not require dramatic change. It requires consistent alignment. One focused action, taken daily, compounds into momentum over time. This habit also strengthens self-trust. Every time you identify the one thing and follow through, you prove to yourself that you can act with discipline and purpose. Confidence grows not from motivation, but from repeated evidence that you do what you say you will do. Over time, you begin to see yourself differently, not as someone who hopes to change, but as someone who takes action. There will be days when the answer feels unclear, and days when the action feels insignificant. But significance is created through repetition. What feels small today becomes powerful when done consistently. This question trains your mind to look for progress instead of perfection. It reminds you that forward movement, no matter how modest, is always better than standing still. As days turn into weeks, this single question reshapes your mindset. You stop chasing productivity for its own sake and start pursuing meaningful progress. You become less reactive and more deliberate. Life doesn't suddenly become easier, but it becomes clearer. And clarity is what allows effort to turn into results. By asking one powerful question each day, you reclaim ownership of your time, your energy, and your direction. You remind yourself that progress is a choice you can make daily, starting with one intentional action that moves you forward. Clarity is the quiet force behind momentum. When you know where you are going, movement becomes natural. When you don't, even simple decisions feel heavy. Most hesitation is not caused by fear or lack of ability, but by uncertainty. The mind resists action when it cannot see a direction, but the moment direction becomes clear, energy returns and action feels lighter. Without clarity, everything feels urgent and nothing feels important. Choices pile up, attention scatters, and overwhelm grows. You start many things and finish few, not because you lack discipline, but because your focus is divided. Clarity cuts through this noise. It simplifies decisions by giving you a filter. Instead of asking, "What should I do now?" you begin asking, "Does this move me where I want to go?" That single shift reduces mental exhaustion. Knowing your direction does not mean knowing every step. It means knowing your next step. Momentum is built not by seeing the entire path, but by having enough clarity to take the next meaningful action. When the next step is clear, hesitation fades. Doubt loses its grip because the mind is no longer guessing. It is responding to purpose. Clarity also protects your energy. When you lack direction, you waste energy debating with yourself second, guessing and reacting to distractions. With clarity, energy is conserved and directed. You say no more easily, not because you are rigid, but because you are aligned. This alignment creates consistency, and consistency is the engine of momentum. Overwhelm often comes from trying to move in too many directions at once. Clarity narrows the field. It gives you permission to focus on what matters and release what doesn't. This focus brings calm, and calm improves performance. When the mind is calm, action becomes intentional instead of rushed. Intentional action compounds over time, creating steady progress that feels sustainable rather than exhausting. Clarity also strengthens confidence. When you understand your direction, you stop seeking constant validation from others. You are less shaken by opinions, delays, or setbacks because you know why you are doing what you are doing. Confidence grows from this inner certainty. It is not loud or aggressive, but steady and grounded. That steadiness keeps you moving even when motivation fades. Momentum is not a sudden burst of speed, it is a rhythm. Clarity sets that rhythm. Each clear decision leads to a completed action, and each completed action reinforces belief in your ability to continue. Progress becomes visible, and visible progress fuels further action. This is how momentum sustains itself. Life will always be complex, and challenges will always exist, but clarity reduces the weight of complexity. It turns chaos into order and effort into movement. When you know your direction, you stop standing still, stop overthinking, and start moving forward with purpose. And once movement begins, momentum takes over, carrying you further than hesitation ever could. Motivation is exciting, but it is unreliable. It comes in waves, often triggered by emotion, a powerful speech, or a sudden surge of hope. It makes you feel ready to change your life overnight. But when the emotion fades, so does the drive. Consistency, on the other hand, does not depend on how you feel. It depends on what you decide to do again and again, regardless of mood or circumstances. That is why consistency beats motivation every time. Daily habits work quietly. They don't demand enthusiasm, they demand commitment. When you rely on habits, you remove the daily negotiation with yourself. You don't ask whether you feel like showing up. You show up because it is who you are and what you do. This shift is powerful because it turns effort into identity. Success becomes less about pushing yourself and more about following a pattern you have already chosen. Inspiration can start the journey, but it cannot sustain it. Real progress happens on ordinary days when nothing feels exciting and no one is watching. These are the moments when habits matter most. A small action done daily may feel insignificant, but repetition gives it strength. Over time, what once required effort becomes automatic, and what becomes automatic becomes reliable. Consistency also removes pressure. When people rely on motivation, they expect big results quickly. When results don't appear, they feel discouraged and quit. Habits change this mindset. They focus attention on process rather than outcome. You stop asking, "Am I there yet?" and start asking, "Did I show up today?" This creates patience, and patience keeps you moving forward. Daily habits build trust with yourself. Every time you follow through, even on a small commitment, you reinforce the belief that you are capable and dependable. Confidence grows from these repeated acts of self-respect. You no longer need to wait for the perfect mood or the right moment. You act because action is part of your routine, not a reaction to emotion. Consistency also protects you from setbacks. Motivation collapses under pressure, but habits endure. On hard days, you may not perform at your best, but you still perform. You keep the chain unbroken. This ability to continue, even imperfectly, is what separates long-term success from short-lived enthusiasm. Over time, daily habits compound. Progress may be slow at first, almost invisible, but it is steady. Weeks turn into months, and small improvements add up to significant change. This compounding effect is the real advantage of consistency. It works even when you don't notice it, shaping your skills, your mindset, and your results in the background. Success is rarely the result of one powerful moment. It is the result of thousands of small, consistent actions done without applause. Motivation may light the fire, but consistency keeps it burning. And it is that steady flame, fueled by daily habits, that ultimately builds a successful and sustainable life. Self-trust is not something you suddenly discover. It is something you build, and it is built in the smallest moments of your day, not the dramatic ones. Every time you make a promise to yourself, no matter how small, you are setting a standard. When you keep that promise, you strengthen your belief in yourself. When you break it, even quietly, you weaken that belief. Over time, these small interactions with yourself shape your confidence more than any external validation ever could. Most people think confidence comes from big wins or public success, but real confidence is private. It grows when no one is watching and no applause is coming. It grows when you wake up and do what you said you would do, even if the task is simple: a short walk, 10 minutes of focus, one honest conversation. These actions may seem minor, but they send a powerful message to your mind. You can be relied upon. Small actions are effective because they are manageable. They remove excuses and reduce resistance. When a promise is realistic, keeping it becomes likely, and each kept promise creates momentum. You begin to expect follow-through from yourself. This expectation changes how you approach challenges. Instead of doubting whether you can handle something, you trust that you will show up and figure it out. Breaking promises to yourself has the opposite effect. It creates hesitation and self-doubt. You begin to question your discipline and your word. This doubt does not appear all at once. It accumulates quietly. That is why rebuilding self-trust does not require grand gestures. It requires returning to small, achievable commitments and honoring them consistently. Keeping promises to yourself also creates alignment between your thoughts and actions. When what you say matches what you do, inner conflict disappears. This alignment brings calm and clarity. You waste less energy arguing with yourself and more energy moving forward. Confidence thrives in this space because it is not forced, it is earned. Over time, small actions reshape your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries and start seeing yourself as someone who follows through. This identity shift is powerful. It affects how you speak, how you decide, and how you respond to setbacks. When challenges arise, you don't collapse under doubt because you have evidence of your reliability. Self-trust also makes growth sustainable. When you trust yourself, you are willing to set higher standards and take bigger risks. Not because you are fearless, but because you believe you will support yourself through the process. This belief allows you to move forward without waiting for perfect conditions or external approval. Confidence is not built by pretending to be strong. It is built by proving again and again that your word matters to you. Small actions, repeated daily, turn promises into proof, and that proof becomes self-trust. When you trust yourself, confidence follows naturally, shaping not only what you achieve, but who you become. Who you are is not determined by what you say you want, by your intentions, or by fleeting moments of inspiration. Who you are is determined by what you do repeatedly, by the actions you take day after day, even when no one is watching. Identity is not born from thoughts alone. It is forged through habits, choices, and patterns of behavior that accumulate over time. Each small action, each repeated behavior, lays a brick in the foundation of the person you are becoming. Most people underestimate the quiet power of repetition. They chase big transformations, believing that a single dramatic act or a sudden breakthrough will define them. But the truth is that identity is sculpted in the ordinary, in the mundane moments that happen consistently. Waking up at the same time, dedicating a few minutes to focus, showing kindness, completing tasks you set out to do. These seemingly small actions gradually build a character that reflects your values and intention. Daily behavior teaches your mind who you are. When you act in alignment with your principles, your brain begins to internalize that identity. For example, consistently showing discipline in your work doesn't just improve your results, it rewires your sense of self. You begin to see yourself as a disciplined person. Your choices, no longer random, become expressions of who you believe you are. This is why consistency matters more than occasional bursts of effort. Identity requires proof, and proof comes from repetition. The process works both ways. Repeated negative behaviors can shape identity just as powerfully as positive ones. If procrastination, avoidance, or excuses become habitual, they define you quietly, day by day. You may not notice the change immediately, but over months and years, your actions create a self-image that can either limit or elevate your potential. That is why paying attention to what you do consistently is essential. Small behaviors, when ignored, accumulate into a force that shapes your life. This principle also highlights personal responsibility. You cannot rely on motivation, luck, or inspiration to define who you are. Motivation is fleeting, but behavior is tangible, Every time you follow through on a commitment, practice a skill, or act with integrity, you reinforce the kind of person you want to become. Identity is not a destination, it is an ongoing construction, built brick by brick through conscious choice. Over time, repeated behavior leads to habit, and habit becomes automatic expression of identity. You stop thinking about being disciplined, kind, or focused. It simply becomes who you are. This is the power of small, consistent actions. They quietly align your inner self with your outer behavior. By choosing your actions deliberately, you steer the course of your life, shaping not only what you achieve but the person you become in the process. Ultimately, who you are is the sum of what you do repeatedly. Every decision, every habit, every action matters because they are the building blocks of identity. What you choose to practice daily is more important than what you say you want or dream about achieving. Identity is sculpted quietly, persistently, through repeated behavior, and it is this identity that determines the life you will ultimately lead. So remember, change doesn't wait for the perfect moment, and transformation doesn't come from massive effort alone. It comes from small, intentional actions, repeated consistently, day after day. Just 60 seconds of focus, clarity, and purpose can set the tone for your entire life. Commit to that one powerful question, follow through with your actions, and trust yourself along the way. Because who you become is not decided by inspiration or motivation. It is decided by the habits you choose to honor every single day. Start today, take that 60-second step, and watch how your life begins to change, one intentional moment at a time.